My name is Zella Parker. I'm 37, and I learned the most brutal lesson of my life from the sound of a wooden box hitting the bottom of a kitchen trash can. I do custom woodworking, not furniture, not the cute little Pinterest projects people assume when they hear the word wood. My work is functional art. Boxes, sculptures, inlay pieces with hidden compartments, and clean joints so tight they look like they grew that way. It's slow. It's obsessive. It takes a kind of patience that isn't romantic until you've watched someone destroy it in 3 seconds. I've been doing it for 8 years now, ever since I walked away from my corporate job and traded meetings for sawdust. Best decision I ever made. The worst decision I ever made was believing love would make a man respect what I built. I'd been with Mason Hale for 3 years. He was 34, sharp suit, expensive watch, always on his phone. Real estate. He was good at it too. The kind of good that shows up in little comments. Little jabs. Little smiles that didn't reach his eyes. Must be nice to play in your workshop all day, he'd say when I came home exhausted, hands aching, shoulders stiff from sanding. I'm just saying, he'd add, like he was being reasonable. One of us has a real job. I told myself he didn't mean it, that he was stressed, that he loved me in his own way. Because when things were good, when he wanted them to be, he could be magnetic. He could make a room feel warmer just by walking into it. But lately it felt like the warmth was being rationed. Like affection was something I had to earn with the right kind of gift, the right kind of image, the right kind of girlfriend. Our anniversary was yesterday, 3 years. And I'd spent the last 3 months building something for him whenever I had a sliver of time between paid commissions. Late nights, early mornings. The hours where the world is quiet and you can hear your own thoughts, sometimes too clearly. I made him a jewelry box. Not because Mason wore jewelry, because Mason collected things. Watches, cufflinks, rings he might wear someday. Little status symbols he kept in drawers like trophies. I wanted to give him something personal to hold all of it, something that said, I see you, I know you. I built this with my hands for your life. It wasn't a box. It was a masterpiece. Walnut and maple inlay, hand-carved details, dovetail joints so clean you couldn't slide paper through them. Hidden compartments, magnetic catches, the kind of piece that costs you time you'll never get back, because you willingly poured it into something you thought was love. I made dinner at home, his favorite, candlelight, plates warmed. I even put on the wine he liked, the one I usually considered too expensive, but I wanted the night to feel like a celebration, because I still believed we were something worth celebrating. Mason sat across from me, leaning back in his chair like he was waiting for a presentation. He watched me the way some people watch a movie they've already decided they're going to criticize. I handed him the gift. He peeled the wrapping away slowly, not with excitement, more like curiosity mixed with expectation. His eyes landed on the box, and for a second I held my breath, waiting for the moment to land. He just looked at it. No smile, no widening eyes, no softening. He turned it in his hands like he was inspecting a product return. What is it? He asked. I laughed once because I thought he was joking. It's a jewelry box, I said, for your watch collection, the cufflinks. You're always losing. I thought you were getting me the bracelet, he cut in. The candle flickered between us. The bracelet? The one I showed you last month, Mason said, like I was the one who forgot something obvious. The Tiffany one. My stomach tightened. I remembered it. Of course I did. He'd held it up on his phone the way someone holds up a goal. $4,000. I swallowed. Mason, I can't afford that right now. Work's been slower. I wanted to give you something meaningful, something. He lifted the box again, and I watched his face harden with a kind of disgust I didn't recognize until it was aimed at me. I don't want handmade junk, he said. The words hit like a slap, sharp, humiliating, unreal. Before I could respond, he stood up, walked into the kitchen, and threw it in the trash. Just like that. 3 months of nights and mornings and splinters and careful measurements, gone with one casual motion. The wooden box hit the bottom with a dull, final thud. Mason brushed his hands together like he'd disposed of something dirty, then walked out of the room. I sat there for a moment, frozen, staring at the candlelight trembling against the wall. My ears rang like something inside me had snapped, but my body hadn't caught up yet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood up slowly and walked into the kitchen. The trash can was half full. Coffee grounds, paper towels, something sticky at the bottom. The box was wedged at an angle like it didn't belong there. Because it didn't. I reached in, pulled it out, and held it like it was fragile, not because it was weak, but because I had loved it into existence. A smear of coffee grounds clung to one corner. I wiped it with my sleeve, gentle, automatic. And that's when I heard his voice. Mason was in the bedroom on the phone, laughing, real laughing, the kind of laugh he used when he wanted someone to think he was charming. I moved closer without meaning to, like my feet needed to confirm what my brain didn't want to believe. "I swear," Mason said, voice bright with mockery. "She really thought that would count as a gift. Like, look at me. I made you a little wooden thing." A woman's laugh answered him through the speaker. Tara Quinn, his ex-girlfriend. Still orbiting him like an unspoken threat. Always just a friend, always someone who gets him. Always the person he called when he wanted an audience. "Oh my God," Tara said. "Stop. Did you actually throw it away?" "I did," Mason said proudly. "I'm not pretending. If it's not Tiffany, it's not happening." The room went cold around me, like the air itself had decided to step back. I stood there holding the box, and it hit me all at once. He didn't just disrespect my work. He didn't just reject my gift. He humiliated me and then performed it for someone else. Something inside me settled. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too messy. This was clarity. I went back to the kitchen table, wrapped the box carefully in bubble wrap like I was preparing it for a safer world, and carried it out to my truck. When I came back inside, Mason was still on the phone. I didn't bother interrupting. "I'm heading out," I said. He waved me off without looking at me, like I was background noise in my own life. So I left. I drove downtown to Hendricks Gallery, the place I'd been quietly working with for 2 years. The owner, Patricia Hendricks, had sold a few of my smaller pieces on consignment. She'd been telling me, gently but persistently, that I was playing too small. "Your best work doesn't belong hidden in a workshop," she'd said once. "It belongs where people can see what you can really do." Patricia was closing up when I arrived. The lights were dimming. The street outside was turning gold with late evening. She saw my truck and paused like she could read something in the way I parked. Too tight, too fast, too final. "Zella!" she called as I stepped out. I carried the box inside like it was a confession. "I need you to look at something," I said. Patricia didn't ask questions right away. She simply turned on the counter light, put on her glasses, and waited as I unwrapped it. When the walnut and maple caught the light, her face changed. She didn't speak for a long moment. She ran her fingers along the joints, opened the lid, found the hidden compartments, tested the magnetic catches. And when she finally looked up at me, her voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Where have you been hiding this level of work?" I stared at the box, then at my own hands, still dusted with the evidence of love and labor. "I guess," I said, and my throat tightened. I didn't think it mattered. Patricia held my gaze like she understood something deeper than would. "Oh," she said softly, "it matters." And in that moment, with my ruined anniversary still clinging to my skin, I felt the first tremor of something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope, not happiness, just the beginning of a door opening, one Mason would never get to walk through with me. Patricia didn't touch the box again right away, like she was giving it space to breathe. She turned it slightly under the light, examining how the maple inlay caught the glow, how the walnut drank it in. Her fingers traced the carved edges the way a jeweler might inspect a diamond. Then she said something that made my stomach drop, because it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like certainty. "This is gallery quality," Patricia said. "Real gallery quality." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You're being nice." "I'm being accurate," she corrected gently. "Zella, the inlay alone, that's not hobby work. That's museum-level precision." I stared down at the box. Just days ago, it had been called junk. It had been thrown away like a spoiled leftover. And yet here, under proper light, it looked like what it had always been. Care, time, devotion, made tangible. Patricia slid open a drawer and pulled out paperwork. "Do you want to sell it?" The question should have hurt. The box was supposed to live in Mason's world, in his bedroom, holding his prized little status symbols. It was supposed to sit on his dresser like a quiet proof that someone loved him enough to spend months making something only he would have. But that world didn't exist. Not the way I'd believed it did. I swallowed. It was meant to be a gift. Patricia's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened. And it was rejected. I nodded once. Her voice dropped, careful and steady. Then let it be appreciated somewhere else. I should have hesitated. A part of me wanted to cling to the idea that Mason would come back into the kitchen, apologize, pull the box out himself, and laugh awkwardly and say he'd been joking. But I knew Mason. He didn't apologize unless it benefited him. And love wasn't a benefit to him. I squared my shoulders. Yes, I said, I want to sell it. Patricia didn't smile like she was winning. She nodded like she was confirming a truth I was finally ready to admit. Okay, she said. We'll put it under our consignment terms. 50-50 split, same as before, but... She paused, and the pause felt heavy. This one is different. She sat down, pulled out her laptop, and began tapping through comparable pieces. She showed me how photos. Jewelry boxes with complex joinery, sculpture-grade woodworking, intricate inlays. And she showed me prices. $8,000, $10,000, $12,000. My pulse thudded in my ears. This can move for 8 to 10, Patricia said. Possibly more with the right collector. I stared at her. That's insane. No, she said. What's insane is you thinking this belongs in a trash can. Something sharp pressed behind my eyes, but I didn't let it fall. Not here. Not now. Patricia drafted the paperwork, added insurance coverage while it was in her possession, and told me she wanted to photograph it properly with professional lighting. A condition report, provenance paperwork, my name attached to it like a signature on a painting. I signed where she pointed. And when I walked back out into the night, my hands were empty. But my chest felt lighter. At home, Mason was either asleep or pretending to be. I didn't bother checking. I took a blanket to the spare room and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kind that comes right before a storm. The next morning, I went to my workshop early and buried myself in a commission piece. I kept my head down, the way I always did when something inside me hurt too much to look at directly. Mason left for work without speaking. No apology. No awkward attempt at repair. Just the slam of the front door and the sound of his car pulling out like I didn't matter. Over the next 2 days, Patricia handled everything with a level of professionalism that felt almost surreal compared to the way Mason had handled my gift. She sent me photos of the box under studio lighting. She showed me how the camera caught the inlay like a river of pale wood running through dark grain. She got an independent appraiser to confirm what she already knew. Comparable pieces had sold between $8,000 and $12,000. Patricia listed mine at $2,500. On Thursday evening, 3 days after I brought it in, Patricia called. Zella, she said, voice bright. It's in the front window. My stomach fluttered. Already? Prime spot, she said. I want people walking by to stop, and they will. I closed my eyes, trying to picture it. My work displayed like something worthy, not hidden in my workshop, not mocked over speakerphone. She continued, We've already had 2 serious inquiries. I leaned against my workbench, sawdust clinging to my sleeves like proof I was real. 2? One collector wants to come back Saturday to examine it closer. I whispered, Wow. Patricia's voice softened again. This is what you've been doing, Zella. This is what your hands can do. Don't let anyone make you forget it. After we hung up, I stood there a long time, staring at the unfinished piece on my bench, my mind drifting back to Mason's words. Handmade junk. I felt something shift again, deeper this time. Not just clarity. Resolve. Friday afternoon, my phone started blowing up. At first, I ignored it. My hands were busy. My mind was trying to stay busy. But the buzzing wouldn't stop. It was relentless, like a mosquito you can't swat. I finally wiped my hands and checked the screen. Mason, 8 missed calls. 15 texts. My stomach tightened before I even opened them. The first text was a single line. What the hell is this? The second. Zella, call me right now. Then, is that your box in Hendrick's gallery? Then, the one that made my skin go cold. The price tag says $2,500. This has to be a joke. My chest went tight, not with fear, something uglier, because I could already see the scene in my mind. Mason, strolling past the gallery window on lunch break, maybe with a coworker, maybe alone. That moment where his eyes catch the familiar inlay pattern. Recognition, then disbelief, then that quick recalculation behind his eyes, like his brain was doing math faster than his heart could do shame. I scrolled further. Why would you put it there? This is embarrassing. Call me. We need to talk. And the grand finale. If someone buys that, we need to discuss what we do with the money. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I didn't realize. Not even, I was wrong. Just money. Ownership. Entitlement. My thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment. A past version of me would have called immediately. A past version of me would have tried to smooth it over, to make him feel better, to protect his ego. But my hands remembered something my heart was still catching up to. He threw my love in the trash. I typed one message. The handmade junk found a better home. Someone who actually appreciates craftsmanship. Then I muted his notifications and went back to work. The rest of the day passed in a blur of sanding and cutting and the rhythmic whine of tools. My body did what it always did. Kept moving, kept making, kept building something stable even when my personal life felt like a collapsing wall. When I got home, Mason was waiting in the driveway. His car was running, headlights on like he'd been sitting there a while, engine idling with impatience. The moment I pulled up, he threw open his door and got out. His face was red. He started yelling before I even had my door open. "Is that my box?" he shouted, voice sharp enough to make the neighbor's curtains twitch. "Is someone actually going to pay $10,000 for that thing?" Yes. I stepped out slowly, closing my door with deliberate calm. "It's not your box," I said. He blinked, like the sentence didn't compute. "What?" "It's my box," I repeated. "My work, my time, my hands." He scoffed, but there was panic under it. "That's not the point. I saw it in the window. It has a price tag. People are looking at it." "That's what galleries are for," I said. He stepped closer. "Zella, don't play dumb. Is that real? 10,000? "It's listed at 10.5, I corrected. Appraised. Market value." For a second, his anger faltered. And then his entire expression changed. It was subtle, like a mask sliding into place. His shoulders loosened. His voice dropped into something gentler. He ran a hand through his hair like a man trying to look regretful. "We need to talk," he said. I almost laughed at how predictable it was. "I'm listening," I said, though every cell in my body already knew what was coming. Mason exhaled dramatically. I overreacted about the gift. There it was. Not an apology, a strategy. He moved closer, lowering his voice like we were sharing intimacy instead of a negotiation. It's actually beautiful. I can see that now. I was stressed. Work has been insane. I took it out on you." I watched him the way you watch someone you used to trust, trying to spot the lie before it bites you again. "So you're sorry?" I asked. His eyes flickered. "Yes, of course, I'm sorry." I tilted my head slightly. "Are you sorry you threw it away? Or sorry it's worth money?" His mouth opened, then closed. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "That's not fair." "It's a simple question," I said. He looked away for half a second, just long enough. Then he turned back, leaning into a fence. "Zella, you're twisting this. I'm trying to make things right." He reached for my arm like he had the right. I stepped back, and his hand froze midair. "Okay," he said, switching tactics again. "Let's just be practical. If it sells, we can use that money. For a trip. For us. Or—" He hesitated, watching my face. "I could finally get that bracelet. I mean, it's basically—" I cut him off. "No." His eyebrows shot up. "No! The money is mine," I said evenly. "From my work. I already know what I'm doing with it." His face tightened. "We've been together 3 years. And I spent 3 months making that box," I replied. "For you." He lifted his hands like I was being unreasonable. "You're being petty." "Petty would be me leaving it in the trash," I said. "I didn't." His voice rose again, the softness slipping. "You should have told me it was valuable. How was I supposed to know?" I stared at him. "The value wasn't the point." He scoffed. "Oh, please." "No," I said, and my voice stayed calm, which seemed to infuriate him more. "I didn't make it to sell. I made it because I loved you. Because I wanted you to have something nobody else had." My throat tightened, but I pushed through it. "And you threw it away because it didn't have a brand name." Mason's jaw clenched. "You're acting like I stabbed you." "You laughed about it," I said quietly, to Tara. His eyes narrowed. "You were listening?" "I didn't have to listen," I said. "Your disrespect was loud enough." Something changed in the air between us. The driveway suddenly felt too small, too public, like the whole neighborhood could see the truth happening. Mason leaned in, voice sharp. "So that's it? You're punishing me over one mistake?" "It wasn't one mistake," I said. "It was a reveal." He stared at me like he couldn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. And maybe he couldn't, because the woman who used to shrink herself to keep him comfortable was gone. Mason's eyes hardened. "Fine," he spat. "Keep your precious money. But don't expect me to stick around while you act like some martyr." I nodded once. "Okay." That single word seemed to hit him like a slap. He blinked, thrown off. "Okay?" "Yes," I said. "That's probably for the best." His nostrils flared. He wanted a fight. He wanted pleading. He wanted me to beg him to stay so he could feel powerful again. Instead, I walked past him toward the house. Behind me, he shouted, "Zella, you're going to regret this." I didn't turn around, because deep down, I had a feeling the only regret waiting in this story wasn't going to be mine. The house felt different after that. Not emptier, quieter, like something toxic had finally stopped humming in the walls. Mason didn't come inside that night. I heard his tires peel out of the driveway, the engine roaring like he needed the sound to convince himself he still had control over something. I went inside, made myself dinner, and ate it standing up in the kitchen. The candle from the night before was still on the counter, melted into a crooked stub of wax. I threw it away without ceremony. Some things don't deserve a second chance. The next few days were silent. Mason stayed at Tara's place, according to a clipped text he sent the following morning. Need space. We'll talk when things cool down. As if he was the one wounded here. As if space was something he was granting me. Not taking, because he didn't know how to win anymore. I didn't respond. On Monday morning, Patricia called. Her voice carried that calm, professional excitement that made my chest tighten with anticipation. The collector from Saturday made an offer. I leaned against my workbench, fingers curling into the wood. How much? 10,000 cash, clean transaction. He's serious. A strange thing happened then. I didn't feel giddy. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady, like the world had finally aligned with something I'd known quietly all along. Do you recommend accepting? I asked. Yes, Patricia said, without hesitation. It's a strong price, and he's legitimate, well known in the woodworking art community. Then accept, I said. The paperwork moved fast. By Thursday morning, the wire transfer hit my account. 5,000. That number didn't feel like revenge. It felt like confirmation. I paid off the remaining $3,000 on my truck the same day. The rest went straight into a separate savings account, earmarked for new workshop equipment, a better lathe, tools I'd been delaying because I told myself I didn't need them yet. Apparently, I'd been waiting for permission. Thursday afternoon, Mason showed up unannounced. Let himself in with his key. I was in the workshop when I heard the door open. The sound of his footsteps in the house felt invasive now, like someone walking through a place they no longer belonged. I stepped inside to find him standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, jaw tight. We need to talk, he said, as if he hadn't already used that line. I kept my voice neutral. You shouldn't be here. He scoffed. I still live here. Not really, I said. That stopped him. He took a breath, visibly forcing himself to stay calm. I've been thinking, he said. Maybe we rush things. Maybe we need a break. Time to really evaluate what we both want. There it was. The word break. Soft, strategic, temporary in a way that only benefits the person saying it. I nodded. That sounds reasonable. Mason blinked. Wait, you agree? Yes. The surprise on his face was almost comical. You're not even going to fight for this? He asked. I tilted my head. Fight for what exactly? He frowned. For us, for 3 years. I leaned against the counter, finally meeting his eyes. I did fight. I fought quietly, for months. You just didn't notice because it didn't come in a Tiffany box. His face flushed. You're never going to let that go. It's not about letting it go, I said. It's about finally seeing it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes darted around the kitchen like he was searching for leverage. Look, he said, switching tone again. Maybe I didn't appreciate your work the way I should have, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. I studied him, the way his posture straightened when he talked about himself, the way his voice softened only when he sensed he was losing ground. Do you care about me? I asked slowly, or about the fact that my work just sold for $10,000. His jaw clenched. That's not fair. I smiled faintly. You keep saying that. He stepped closer. You're being dramatic. And you're being transparent. That's when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, hesitated, then flipped it face down on the counter like he didn't want me to see the name. Too late. I'd already caught it. Tara. I let out a breath that sounded more tired than angry. You should probably answer that. His eyes flicked up. It's not like that. Of course it is, I said. It always is. He grabbed his jacket instead. I'm leaving. That's probably for the best, I said. He paused at the door, waiting, hoping, for me to say something that would restore his power. I didn't. After he left, I sat on the floor of my workshop and let myself breathe. Not cry. Just breathe. That weekend, Tara called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Zella, she said, voice tentative. I hope this isn't weird. It is, I said, but go ahead. She exhaled. Mason's having a hard time. He knows he messed up. He feels like everything blew up so fast. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. What does he think he messed up? There was a pause, long enough to mean something. The gift, Tara said finally. The money situation. He didn't realize how talented you actually were. There it was again. I closed my eyes. Tara, let me ask you something. Okay. Would Mason be reaching out if that box had sold for $50 instead of $10,000? Silence. Then quieter. Probably not. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. That's all I needed to know. She rushed to add, "He's been talking about how he could have had a piece worth thousands, about your commissions, about how other people are recognizing you now." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Does he talk about me?" Another pause. "No," she admitted. "Not really." I thanked her for her honesty and ended the call. That conversation didn't hurt. It freed me. 2 weeks later, Patricia called again, this time practically glowing. "The buyer wants to commission another piece," she said. "Custom, similar style, budget is 12,000. I had to sit down. A real commission. Not a one-off sale, not luck. Momentum. I said yes without hesitation. Patricia set up a meeting. The collector, Richard, flew in from San Francisco. We spent 3 hours discussing wood types, timelines, intent. He asked about my process, my philosophy, what I wanted each piece to say. He listened. He appreciated. He paid half up front. And just like that, the world cracked open. Galleries in Denver and Portland reached out. Patricia started building a portfolio. My name began circulating in spaces I'd never imagined entering. And then, inevitably, Mason came back. He showed up at my workshop one afternoon, ignoring the closed sign on the door. I was mid-cut when I saw him in my peripheral vision. I turned off the saw slowly. "You need to leave." His eyes were already scanning the space. The wood, the tools, the detailed plans spread across my workbench. "What's this?" he asked, pointing. "Another commission?" "Yes," I said. 12,000. His eyes widened. "How many of these are you getting?" he asked. "That's not your business." He swallowed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "I get it now. I really do. I understand what I lost." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Do you understand the value because of the work or because of the price tag?" He hesitated. That hesitation was everything. He reached for me. I stepped back. "We're done," I said. "You need to stop showing up here." His eyes filled, real tears this time. "People make mistakes," he said. "You can't just throw away 3 years." I crossed my arms. "You threw away 3 months of my life without a second thought." He stood there, shaking, finally realizing something he should have known much earlier. He hadn't lost me because of one mistake. He lost me because he showed me who he was. I walked him to the door. "Please don't come back," I said. And for the first time, I meant it without anger, only certainty. Success doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, like a calendar filling up without you noticing, like emails stacking in your inbox from names you don't recognize yet, like your hands hurting in a good way because they're finally doing the work they were meant to do. The commission for Richard changed everything. Not overnight, but undeniably. Patricia moved fast. She put together a proper portfolio of my work, reached out to collectors she trusted, and introduced me to 2 additional galleries, one in Denver, one in Portland. Both wanted to carry my pieces on consignment. For the first time since I'd left corporate life, I wasn't chasing validation. It was coming to me. I raised my rates. I started saying no to projects that didn't excite me. I focused on pieces that challenged my skills instead of just paying the bills. And somewhere in the middle of all that forward motion, I started noticing something else. The quiet. No criticism echoing through the house. No side comments about real jobs. No performance of affection followed by withdrawal. Just space. Space to think. Space to create. Space to breathe. Richard flew back 2 weeks later to finalize the design for his commission. We spent hours refining details, discussing how the piece should feel when opened, what kind of permanence it should carry. He didn't rush me. He didn't negotiate me down. He trusted me. That trust did more for my confidence than the money ever could. A month later, a local arts magazine reached out. They were doing a feature on emerging artisans. Patricia had recommended me. I almost said no out of habit, out of that old reflex that told me I wasn't ready yet. Then I caught myself, and I said yes. The interview was calm, thoughtful. The photographer spent time in my workshop, capturing my hands mid-motion, the sawdust in the air, the quiet intensity of the space where things were built instead of consumed. The article came out a month later. Full spread. Photos of my work, my story, my name. The jewelry box was featured prominently. Richard had given permission to photograph it from his private collection. The headline called me a builder of permanence. My phone exploded. 4 galleries reached out within days. 8 commission requests followed. 2 larger publications asked for interviews. My website crashed under the traffic. I upgraded my hosting plan while laughing out loud in my workshop like a woman who couldn't believe her own life. And then, inevitably, Mason reappeared. We ran into each other at a restaurant downtown. I was there with Patricia and a potential client. A business dinner, the kind I'd never imagined myself having 3 months earlier. Mason was seated across the room with someone younger, sharper, dressed like ambition, wrapped in a tailored suit. He saw me immediately. I felt his gaze before I looked up. I gave him a polite nod, nothing more, and turned back to my conversation. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched him lose focus. He kept glancing over, missing what his date was saying, tracking me like I was a mistake he couldn't undo. At one point, he excused himself. A moment later, I needed the restroom too. The hallway was narrow, dimmer than the dining room, the kind of space where conversations feel more honest because there's nowhere to perform. He was waiting. "Zella," he said, voice softer now, "you look good." "Thank you," I replied evenly. "How's business, Veg?" he asked, though the question was pointless. He already knew. "It's good," I said, "busy." "I saw the article," he said quickly. "I'm really proud of you." The word proud landed wrong, like he was trying to reclaim a role he'd forfeited. "Thanks," I said, stepping past him. He shifted to block me slightly, not aggressively, but enough to force the conversation. "I've been seeing someone, Tom," he said. "It's not serious." I met his eyes. "Okay." He frowned. "Don't you want to know who?" "No." He hesitated. Are you seeing someone?" "That's not relevant," I said. What was relevant was the clarity humming through me, like a steady current. "I learned something from our relationship," I continued. "I learned not to ignore red flags, not to stay with someone who doesn't respect my work or my time." His face fell. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," I said. "You just didn't care enough not to." The words hit him harder than yelling ever could. He swallowed. "Will you ever forgive me?" I studied him for a moment, not with anger, not with longing, with understanding. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "You showed me who you were. I believed you." I stepped around him and walked back to my table. That night, I closed a $15,000 commission. When I glanced across the room afterward, Mason was gone. His date was still there, confused, alone, scrolling through her phone. 3 weeks later, I signed a lease. A small studio space, half workshop, half gallery. A place where my work could live in the open instead of hiding behind closed doors. Patricia helped me design the layout, lighting, displays, flow. She'd become more than a gallery owner. She'd become a mentor. Opening night was packed. I sold 3 pieces, booked 5 commissions. My parents came, my sister, friends who'd supported me years ago when I'd quit corporate life, and everyone thought I was reckless. I was standing near the window when I saw Mason outside. He was dressed up, standing across the street, watching through the glass. He didn't come in. He just stood there for a long time, then turned and walked away. And I felt nothing but relief. A week later, I met Ethan. He wasn't part of the art world. He didn't care about galleries or price tags. He was a librarian, quiet, thoughtful, curious in a way that didn't feel performative. He asked questions, not to impress, but to understand. He came to my studio one afternoon and watched me work without interrupting. Said it felt meditative, peaceful. I gave him a small wooden bookmark I'd made from scrap. "Nothing fancy," he cried. Not because it was worth money, because someone made it just for him. And in that moment, I realized something simple and final. The sound of success isn't applause. It's the absence of disrespect. 6 weeks into seeing Ethan, I realized something that would have terrified the old version of me. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. No anxiety when my phone stayed quiet. No calculating my words so they landed just right. No shrinking my work to make someone else feel tall. Ethan didn't need convincing. He just showed up. When I told him I'd opened my own studio, he didn't ask how much I was making. He asked how it felt to finally have a space that reflected me. When I canceled dinner once because a piece wasn't cooperating, he brought takeout to the workshop and sat quietly with a book while I finished. He never made me choose between love and my work. He understood they were connected. 3 months after the breakup, Mason emailed me. A long one. Paragraphs of reflection. Accountability. Growth. All the right words, carefully arranged like furniture in a staged listing. He apologized for everything. Said he'd changed. Said he finally understood what he'd lost. Not the money, not the status, but me. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Just to talk. No expectations. I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Not because I was angry, because I was done. Some things can be repaired. Others only teach. And Mason had already taught me everything he ever could. The studio kept growing. Richard became a regular client. His network of collectors kept me booked solid for 8 months straight. I raised my prices twice, and demand didn't slow. I started a waiting list. I hired a part-time assistant to help with finishing work. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hustling just to survive. I was building something sustainable. One evening, months later, Richard sent me a photo. The jewelry box. It sat in his study, polished, protected, surrounded by books and framed photographs. Inside, he kept his late wife's jewelry. He told me it reminded him of permanence, of things built to last. I stared at the image for a long time. That box had never been junk. It had simply been in the wrong hands. 6 months after everything ended, Mason reached out one last time. Another email, shorter this time, quieter. He said he hoped I was happy, said he finally understood that value wasn't about price tags or brand names, said he wished he'd known that sooner. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Because happiness doesn't need closure from the people who couldn't see you when it mattered. Ethan came by the studio that night, watched me work, asked questions about grain patterns and joinery, not because he needed to understand, but because he wanted to. I handed him another small piece I'd made, something simple, thoughtful. He smiled like it meant the world, and I knew, without doubt, that this was what respect looked like. The jewelry box lives in a private collection now. My work lives in galleries. My name lives in conversations I never imagined being part of. But the most important thing I built wasn't made of wood. It was discernment. I learned that meaning isn't found in price tags. It's found in time, in effort, in care. Mason couldn't see that when it mattered. The $10,000 price tag didn't create the value. It only revealed what was already there. I see it now, and the people who matter always did.